Alright, I don't even know where to start with this, but I'm hoping putting it into words will make it feel less insane. So, I'm 26, living in NYC, and until about a week ago, I had a pretty good thing going. I worked at this small but growing marketing agency. The pay wasn't amazing, it's New York, after all, but it was enough to survive, and I really liked the people there. It was one of those workplaces where you could joke around without it being weird, and the whole team had this we're in it together vibe. My best friend Lisa was part of that team, which made it even better. Lisa and I go way back. We met in college, and we've been inseparable ever since. She's funny, ridiculously charming, and the kind of person you just want to be around. When I landed this job a year and a half ago, Lisa was actually the one who referred me. She'd been there for a few months already. So yeah, we were kind of a package deal at work. Working with her felt like a dream. We had inside jokes, we'd grab lunch together, and our desks were right next to each other. Having your best friend at work is like having a cheat code to surviving the grind, you know? And honestly, Lisa was really good at her job. She handled clients like a pro, always knew how to diffuse tense situations, and had this knack for turning the most boring campaigns into something exciting. If anything, I looked up to her. She'd been at the company longer, so I leaned on her when I needed advice or a second opinion on something. And she was always happy to help. She was like a big sister to me in a lot of ways. For a long time, it felt like we were living the dream, two best friends navigating their 20s, surviving NYC, and killing it at work. Or at least, that's what I thought. Things at work were smooth sailing for a while. Lisa and I were kind of like the dynamic duo in the office. People would joke about how we must have come as a two-for-one deal, and honestly, it felt great. We worked in different parts of the marketing team. Lisa handled client relations, while I was more on the creative side, brainstorming campaigns and writing copy. Our roles overlapped enough that we'd team up on projects sometimes, but not so much that we were stepping on each other's toes. It was the perfect balance. Outside of work, we were still as tight as ever. Happy hours, random late-night pizza runs, even weekends spent binging trashy TV at each other's apartments. Lisa's apartment was nicer than mine. She always managed to find the best deals, which she loved to remind me of, but she'd still insist on coming over to my tiny studio in Brooklyn half the time, saying it had character. There was never any tension between us, at least not that I could see. If anything, Lisa seemed genuinely proud of me whenever I did something well at work. I remember this one time, I nailed a pitch for a big client, and Lisa hyped me up like I was the next Don Draper. She even bought me a fancy latte the next morning and left it on my desk with a sticky note that said, "You're a badass. Keep it up." I won't lie, having her there made everything easier. Whenever work got stressful, she'd be the first to remind me to breathe and not take it all so seriously. And on bad days, she'd sneak me a cupcake from the bakery near the office. Looking back, it was almost too perfect. Like, if you wrote this as a movie script, people would roll their eyes and say it's unrealistic. But at the time, it felt like we had the kind of friendship people dream about. By the time I hit the one-year mark at the agency, things were going really well. It felt like one of those rare stretches in life where everything just clicks. Lisa and I were both doing great in our roles, and I could tell Amanda, our boss, trusted us. Now, let me take a moment to describe Amanda because she was the kind of person you couldn't help but notice. Picture a younger, edgier version of Cate Blanchett, except instead of icy, she had this warm but intimidating vibe. Amanda was in her early 30s, always dressed like she'd stepped out of a Vogue editorial, sleek black dresses, perfectly tailored blazers, and heels so high they should have been classified as a weapon. Her signature red lipstick was practically her trademark. She wasn't just a boss, she was the boss. Amanda had this no-nonsense attitude that made people sit up straighter when she walked into a room. But she wasn't a tyrant or anything. If anything, she had this way of making you want to impress her. Like, you'd work twice as hard just to get one of her approving nods. But here's the thing about Amanda, she wasn't all business. She had a sharp sense of humor and could roast you in a way that somehow made you laugh and feel like you'd earned her respect at the same time. Everyone in the office had a bit of a work crush on her, myself included. I'd never admit that out loud, but come on, it's Amanda. Anyway, Lisa and I had managed to earn Amanda's trust, and that felt huge. Lisa was a rock star at client relations. She could handle even the most difficult clients and somehow leave them feeling like they owed her an apology. I, on the other hand, was more focused on the creative side. My job was to brainstorm campaign ideas, write copy, and put together the kind of pitches that would get clients to sign on the dotted line. Amanda loved to give credit where it was due, and during our Monday morning meetings, she always made a point to highlight wins from the team. Lisa and I were getting shout-outs pretty regularly by then. Lisa, Amanda would say, leaning against the conference table with her arms crossed, "That client from hell we were all complaining about last week? Yeah." Lisa completely turned them around. "They're already asking for a renewal." And then she'd turn to me. "And me? That pitch you gave for the big-name client campaign? Nailed it. They're moving forward with all your ideas." I won't lie, it felt good. I'd glance over at Lisa, and she'd give me this big grin, mouthing something like, "You killed it." After the meetings, we'd high-five or grab lunch and joke about how we were secretly Amanda's favorites. It didn't feel competitive between us, though. I honestly thought we were both just happy to be doing well. Lisa was thriving in her role, and I was finally starting to feel like I'd found my groove. Our coworkers seemed to love us too. There was this running joke in the office that Lisa and I were plotting to take over the agency. Even Amanda played into it sometimes, saying things like, "If you two ever start your own firm, don't poach my clients." Or my team. It was all in good fun, and honestly, I believed we were both just enjoying the ride. Life outside work was still great too. Lisa and I hung out all the time, happy hours with the team, late-night binge-watching sessions at each other's apartments, even the occasional impromptu karaoke night. If you'd asked me back then, I would have said Lisa was my ride or die. The kind of friend you'd trust with everything. And at work, it was even better. Having your best friend as your coworker? It was like cheating at life. Looking back, though, I wonder if I missed the signs. The months rolled on, and things only seemed to get better. Amanda kept giving me bigger projects to manage, and Lisa's knack for handling difficult clients was making her a bit of a legend around the office. The two of us were on a roll, and I was starting to feel like I'd actually made it in this crazy city. I'd even started saving up, trying to save up for a slightly bigger apartment. You know, one where I could fit a couch without it blocking the bathroom door. Lisa thought this was hilarious, and every time I mentioned it, she'd tease me about becoming bougie. At work, Lisa and I were practically inseparable. If we weren't collaborating on something, we'd be sneaking little asides during meetings or messaging each other dumb memes when things got slow. I'd even started bouncing some of my campaign ideas off her before presenting them. Lisa had a great eye for what clients would go for, and her input helped me feel more confident. Amanda noticed how well we worked together, and I think she liked it. She started pairing us up more often on projects, with Lisa managing the client side and me handling the creative. It was a good system, and our campaigns were actually getting results. There was this one campaign for a local coffee chain that I'll never forget. Lisa had charmed the client into giving us complete creative freedom, and I went all out with this quirky, artsy concept. Amanda loved it, the client loved it, and Lisa was the first one to congratulate me when we got the green light. She even sent me a text later that night. "Lisa, told you were a genius, winking face drinks on me this Friday?" Work-life balance wasn't just a buzzword for us, we were living it. Friday happy hours turned into late-night hangouts more often than not. Our coworkers would eventually call it a night, but Lisa and I would keep going, wandering through the city and talking about everything from work drama to our childhood dreams. One night, after a few too many drinks, Lisa got this dreamy look in her eyes and said, "You know, I've always pictured us running something together someday. Like a real business. You, me, and Amanda. We'd be unstoppable." I laughed it off, but I won't lie, the idea stuck with me. I wasn't sure if I was cut out to be a business owner, but the thought of building something with Lisa and maybe even Amanda felt kind of exciting. At the time, I didn't realize how much Lisa's words would come back to haunt me. It all started with a promotion. Not mine, Lisa's. Amanda called a team meeting one Wednesday morning and announced that Lisa was being promoted to senior account manager. It wasn't entirely unexpected. Lisa was incredible at her job, and everyone in the room clapped like it was a no-brainer. I clapped the loudest. After the meeting, Amanda pulled me aside to let me know she was considering expanding my role too. She didn't use the word promotion, but she hinted that she wanted me to lead a new creative initiative the agency was rolling out. She said my work on recent campaigns had impressed her, and she thought I was ready for more responsibility. I felt like I was on cloud nine. Lisa and I had worked hard, and now it seemed like we were both finally getting recognized for it. The first sign that something was off came later that week. Lisa and I were having lunch, like we always did, and I mentioned Amanda's comment about expanding my role. I was excited, thinking Lisa would be just as thrilled as I was. But instead of her usual enthusiasm, she just smiled and said, "That's great," in this kind of flat tone. It was weird, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Lisa was probably just stressed. Her new role came with a lot more responsibility, and she'd already mentioned how her inbox had doubled overnight. Things started to change after that, though. Lisa seemed distant. At work, she stopped swinging by my desk to chat, and our usual lunches became sporadic. When we did hang out, she wasn't as talkative as usual, and sometimes it felt like she was just going through the motions. I tried to brush it off. People get busy, right? Especially in New York, where everyone's always juggling a million things. But something about Lisa's shift in behavior didn't sit right with me. The real turning point came a couple of weeks later. Amanda called me into her office to talk about the new initiative. She wanted to finalize my role and get started on a timeline. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I was finally about to level up. But that evening, when I went to share the news with Lisa, she was cold. I told her about the new role, expecting her to congratulate me or at least smile. Instead, she gave me this tight-lipped expression and said, "Wow, you're really moving up, huh?" It felt like there was something unspoken behind her words, but I couldn't figure out what. I laughed nervously and said something like, "We both are. You're killing it in your new role." But Lisa just nodded and changed the subject. That was the first time I thought, maybe something's wrong. The changes at work weren't immediate, they crept in, little by little, until I couldn't ignore them anymore. Lisa seemed busier than ever, which made sense with her promotion, but it felt like she was deliberately pulling away. Conversations we used to have about projects became fewer and shorter. She stopped asking for my input, and whenever I tried to offer it, she'd brush it off with, "I've already handled it." At first, I didn't think much of it. Lisa's new role meant she had more responsibilities, and I figured she was just trying to prove herself. But her distance wasn't the only thing that felt off. Amanda, who used to be supportive and collaborative, started treating me differently too. She began scrutinizing my work more closely, questioning ideas that would have been approved without a second thought just a month ago. Her feedback, which used to be constructive and encouraging, became more critical. It wasn't mean or overtly harsh, but it felt pointed, like I was suddenly under a microscope. I tried to push through it, telling myself that maybe Amanda was just holding me to a higher standard now. After all, she had mentioned wanting to expand my role. It made sense she'd expect more from me. But something about her tone felt different, colder somehow. One afternoon, after a particularly frustrating meeting where Amanda dismissed most of my ideas for a campaign, I decided to step out for some air. The little coffee shop down the block was my usual go-to when I needed to clear my head, so I headed there, trying to shake the knot of anxiety in my chest. Standing in line, I scrolled aimlessly through my phone, catching up on notifications and emails. That's when I saw it, a message from Sarah, one of my coworkers. She wasn't someone I talked to outside of work often, so it felt strange to get a message from her. It was short and to the point. "Hey, just thought you should know. Lisa's been spending a lot of time in Amanda's office lately. Is everything okay?" My first reaction was confusion. Of course, Lisa was spending more time with Amanda. She'd been promoted, and managing key accounts meant working more closely with her. But why would Sarah feel the need to point it out? I replied as casually as I could, asking what she meant. Her response came quickly. I overheard them talking about some of your projects earlier this week. Just seemed a little weird. My stomach twisted. I couldn't imagine why Lisa and Amanda would be discussing my projects without me. It wasn't like Lisa and I were working on anything together at the moment, and Amanda usually involved me directly if there was an issue. Trying to dismiss the unease growing in the back of my mind, I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Lisa wouldn't go behind my back, she was my best friend. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and for the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The following weeks felt like walking through quicksand. The harder I tried to keep everything normal, the more I felt things slipping out of my control. Lisa's distance was impossible to ignore. We'd gone from texting each other throughout the day to barely speaking unless it was work-related. Even then, she kept it curt, like she didn't have the time or the interest to chat. The little rituals that made work fun, like our lunch breaks or coffee runs, were suddenly non-existent. Amanda's demeanor toward me continued to shift too. During meetings, she started giving other team members opportunities one would have expected to handle. Projects that I used to lead were being reassigned, sometimes without explanation. When I asked Amanda if there was anything I needed to improve, she gave me a polite but vague response about needing more consistency. I replayed her words in my head 100 times, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Consistency? I'd been meeting every deadline, hitting every target. My work hadn't changed, so what was going on? The breaking point came during a Friday afternoon meeting. Amanda was reviewing ideas for a campaign pitch, and I'd come prepared with what I thought was a solid concept. It wasn't revolutionary, but it fit the client's brief perfectly. When it was my turn to present, I'd barely got 3 sentences in before Amanda cut me off. "This doesn't feel right for the brand," she said, flipping through the presentation slides with a furrowed brow. "We'll need to rethink this from scratch." It stung, but what hurt more was what happened next. Lisa, sitting at the other end of the conference table, jumped in with a suggestion, something eerily similar to the idea I'd floated to her weeks ago during one of our last real conversations. "This might be a better direction," Lisa said, her tone cool and confident. Amanda nodded, her face lighting up in approval. "Yes, exactly. This is the kind of thinking we need." I sat there, stunned, while Lisa kept talking, building on the concept that should have been mine. It wasn't just that she'd taken credit, it was the way she delivered it, like it was no big deal. Like I wasn't even there. After the meeting, I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. Ideas get borrowed and shared all the time in creative fields, right? But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was deliberate. Later that evening, Sarah stopped by my desk on her way out. She hesitated, glancing around the nearly empty office, and then said quietly, "Hey, just so you know, Lisa's been in Amanda's office a lot lately." Like, a lot. "I'm not trying to stir the pot, but I figured you'd want to know." I nodded, forcing a smile, but my mind was spinning. If Sarah had noticed, how much was I missing? And what exactly were Lisa and Amanda talking about behind closed doors? It was the first time I let myself think, maybe Lisa's not on my side anymore. I tried to give Lisa the benefit of the doubt. I really did. For all my suspicions, I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation, something innocent the first wasn't seeing. But everything finally came crashing down about a week after that Friday meeting. It started with an email. Amanda called for an impromptu meeting with me late one afternoon, right as I was wrapping up my work. The subject line read, "Performance Review Discussion." My stomach immediately tied itself into a knot. Performance review? I hadn't been told about any issues, and it wasn't the time of year for formal evaluations. I walked into Amanda's office feeling uneasy, but determined to stay professional. Amanda didn't waste time. She gestured for me to sit and launched into it. "I've been reviewing your recent work," she began, her tone clipped but calm, "and I've noticed some concerning patterns. Missed opportunities, lack of creative direction, and some inconsistency in execution. I think it's time we have a serious conversation about your role here." I was too stunned to respond at first. Missed opportunities? Inconsistency? None of this had ever come up before. "Sure," Amanda had been more critical lately, but I hadn't heard anything that would justify this. When I finally found my voice, I asked her to clarify, pointing out that I'd been meeting deadlines and hitting targets. Amanda nodded but didn't budge. It's not just about hitting targets. It's about forward momentum, about pushing yourself and the team. Lately, I'm not seeing that from you. Her words felt rehearsed, like she'd been preparing this speech for a while. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I could tell it wouldn't make a difference. Amanda had already made up her mind. As I left her office, my head was spinning. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to figure out where this was coming from. It didn't make sense. Sure, Amanda had been harder on me recently, but this felt like a deliberate effort to paint me as a problem. Later that evening, I stayed late at the office, hoping to find some clarity by going over my recent projects. Lisa was still there too, though she was unusually quiet, working in her corner without the usual casual banter. At some point, Sarah passed by my desk again, looking hesitant. She lingered for a moment before finally speaking. "I'm not sure if I should say this," she began, "but you deserve to know. Lisa's been, well, let's just say she's been very vocal in her one-on-ones with Amanda. I don't know all the details, but she's been saying things about your work." "What kinds of things?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah hesitated before answering. "Just stuff about you not pulling your weight, about clients being unhappy with the creative direction." She's framing it like she's trying to help, but it didn't sit right with me. My heart sank. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Lisa? The person I trusted most at work? The person who had always had my back? Suddenly, so many little moments started to make sense. The shift in Amanda's attitude, the reassignments, Lisa's coldness. She wasn't just pulling away, she was actively undermining me. That night, as I lay awake in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, one thought kept repeating in my mind. How could she do this to me? By Monday morning, I'd worked myself into knots trying to figure out how to confront Lisa. Part of me still wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding, that Sarah had misread the situation. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. At work, Lisa acted like nothing was wrong. She greeted me with her usual morning sunshine, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. I watched her throughout the day, noticing every little interaction she had with Amanda, every time she walked past my desk without stopping to chat. The distance between us felt suffocating. Then came the real blow. Toward the end of the day, Amanda called another team meeting. It was unusual. No one had heard about it until an hour before, and the timing felt strange. Everyone gathered in the conference room, exchanging curious glances. Amanda walked in, holding a folder and wearing that unreadable expression of hers. "Thanks for coming on such short notice," she began, glancing around the room. "I wanted to share some updates regarding team structure and upcoming projects." My heart started racing. Something about her tone set me on edge. She talked for a few minutes about new clients and strategy shifts, but then she said it. As part of these changes, Lisa will be taking on a new leadership role, overseeing both client relations and campaign strategy. The room broke into polite applause, and Lisa flashed her signature confident grin. I clapped too, though my hands felt like lead. Amanda continued. "With this shift, we're also making some adjustments to responsibilities on the creative side. Unfortunately, this means my name will be stepping back from their current role." My ears started ringing. It took a moment for her words to register. Stepping back? What did that even mean? Amanda didn't look at me as she kept talking, explaining how my role would be restructured to focus on smaller projects with oversight from Lisa. It was dressed up in corporate language, but the message was clear. I'd been demoted. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. Meanwhile, Lisa sat across the table, looking completely unbothered. She didn't even glance in my direction. After the meeting, I stayed behind, hoping to catch Amanda for an explanation, but she left the room before I could say a word. As I was gathering my things, Lisa walked over, her expression unreadable. "I was going to tell you," she said, her voice low so no one else could hear. "It's not personal, it's just how things work sometimes." Not personal? My best friend had just taken my job, my life, and all she could say was that it wasn't personal? I felt my chest tighten as I stared at her, searching for any hint of regret or guilt. But there was none. Just a cool, detached calm that made my skin crawl. I trusted you, I finally said, my voice shaking. Lisa sighed, like she was the one being inconvenienced. Look, I didn't ask for this. Amanda made the call. I'm just doing what's best for the team. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of how deeply she'd betrayed me. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, gutted. After the meeting, I didn't go back to my desk. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too much, and my head felt like it was filled with static. I grabbed my bag, told Sarah I wasn't feeling well, and bolted out of the office. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving me drained and hollow. I collapsed onto my bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying the meeting over and over. The way Amanda had announced the changes like it was no big deal. The way Lisa had sat there, calm and collected, as if she hadn't just stabbed me in the back. I spent the rest of the evening spiraling, Googling things like, what to do if your boss demotes you, and can a coworker take your job? Every article told me the same thing. Unless I had proof of misconduct or discrimination, there wasn't much I could do. The next morning, I woke up determined to confront Amanda. If nothing else, I needed answers. When I walked into her office, she didn't seem surprised to see me. She gestured for me to sit and folded her hands on the desk. I assume you have questions, she said. I launched into it, asking why I'd been demoted and what had changed since our conversation about expanding my role. Amanda listened, her expression neutral, before responding. This decision wasn't made lightly. We felt the team needed stronger alignment between client relations and creative strategy. Lisa's experience made her the logical choice to oversee both. Her words felt rehearsed, like she was reading from a script. I pressed her, pointing out that my work had always met or exceeded expectations. But Amanda didn't budge. This isn't about performance, she said, almost dismissively. It's about positioning the agency for growth. I left her office feeling worse than before. Amanda had made it clear that my future at the company wasn't a priority. As for Lisa, I didn't confront her again. What was the point? She'd made her choice. The next few weeks were a blur. I tried to keep my head down and focus on my restructured role, but it was impossible to ignore the whispers from coworkers or the pitying looks from Sarah. The worst part was seeing Lisa step into her new role so seamlessly, like she'd always belonged there. Eventually, I made the decision to leave. Staying in that office, under Lisa's watch, felt unbearable. I found a new job at a smaller agency, not as glamorous, but the team was kind, and the work felt meaningful. I'd like to say I've moved on, but some days it still stings. Losing my job was one thing, but losing Lisa? That cut deeper than I ever thought it would. Looking back, I think I ignored a lot of red flags. Lisa's need to always be the center of attention, her habit of spinning every situation in her favor. I wanted to believe our friendship was stronger than ambition. I wanted to believe she cared. I haven't spoken to Lisa since my last day at the agency. She didn't even say goodbye. Sometimes I wonder if she feels any guilt, or if she even thinks about me at all. But then I remind myself that people like Lisa don't lose sleep over the people they step on. And honestly, I'm better off without her.
Thank you for listening to the end. Don't forget to subscribe and like us.